I visited all the most popular European countries for relocation and tried living in each of them. Some of them truly surprised me, while others turned out to be highly overrated. Today I'll be sharing my personal ranking from the countries I'm unlikely to return to those I want to visit again and again. Throughout the video, I'll share a guide for each country, so make sure to watch until the end. As always, you're on the Velesevich channel. Let's not waste any time. Let's go! We'll be comparing 6 countries for relocation that are popular here in the European Union. These are Austria, Germany, France, Poland, and the Czech Republic. And of course, Spain, which we've featured in a ton of videos on my channel. For each country, we'll cover the mentality of the locals, income and expenses, rental prices, groceries, and overall personal impressions that influence our experiences in these countries. We'll list the countries in order from the worst, where I definitely wouldn't want to live, to the best. This is based on my subjective opinion. So friends, be sure to leave a comment, give a like, and subscribe to the channel, because next I'll be comparing grocery prices in 5 European Union countries. And yes, I actually traveled to each of them and personally bought these groceries there. So subscribe so you don't miss out. I'll start my ranking with France. Yes, and maybe I'll get cancelled in the comments right now, but let me remind you, this is just my subjective opinion. Let's start with the mentality of the locals. The French are proud, individualistic, and emotional. They value their language and culture very highly, and they expect the same from you. By the way, it's the same in Poland, where we're filming this video right now. Without French, even in Paris, it will be difficult. Even if someone knows English, they might still reply in French, simply because we're in France and speak French here. At the same time, the French know how to enjoy life like no one else. A 3-hour lunch is completely normal for them. A 5-week vacation per year is considered the bare minimum. Coffee at a cafe isn't a quick sip on the go, but a ritual. They don't live just to work, they work to live. I also filmed a video in France literally just a couple of weeks ago. And what was interesting is that we actually met a Ukrainian woman there who has been living in France for more than 8 years. And for them, it's like this. Lunch is according to schedule. So for example, if we met her there at 1 o'clock, that's her scheduled lunchtime, and so we have lunch at that time when we meet. And, you know, they're just so chill, so relaxed, so laid back. Honestly, that surprised me. I didn't expect that from the French. Now let's look at income and expenses in France. The minimum wage there is about 1,800 euros, and the average salary ranges from 2,000 to 3,000 euros net. IT specialists in Paris can earn from 45,000 euros per year. That's gross. Doctors and lawyers start from 60,000 euros per year. By the way, I already talked about this in one of my videos about France. And what surprised me is that even in Paris, a lot of entrepreneurs are opening businesses, and they also hire our Ukrainians. What about renting? And this is where things get interesting, because rent in France, and especially in Paris, is among the most expensive in all of Europe. I think you probably thought about that too. But if you look at the north of France, I'm not talking about the French Riviera, but specifically about small towns. And in places where the population isn't very large, rent is much cheaper there. When it comes to buying apartments, what surprised me in France is that you can actually buy a house in a small town. And I will now name these regions for you and show them on the map, where you can even buy a house for under 100,000 euros. That really surprised me. There's even a Ukrainian woman who bought a house for 80,000 euros and talks about it on her blog. And it's very interesting to watch. Now let's take a look at the expenses specifically in Paris. Rent plus utilities range from 1,400 to 2,200 euros. Groceries are approximately 400 to 600 euros. And let's also include transportation costs. That's about 100 to 200 euros. And in total, that comes out to 3,000 euros per month, which I think is, well, not very little. And as in all European countries, you need 2 people working in order to have at least some comfortable standard of living. I would even say not just comfortable, but simply to cover basic needs. That's housing and utilities. But among the downsides of Europe in general, I think that everything here is set up so that you just have some basic minimum you need to cover, and it seems like you can't really move beyond that level. That is, here everyone has a salary of about 1,000 to 2,000 euros per person, and to me it feels kind of like, damn, slavery. By the way, since we're already talking about Ukrainians in Europe, there's always the question, how is it convenient to pay, where is it more profitable, and how do you avoid spending on little things? And finally, I found a great solution for myself, Whitebit Nova. You just use it to pay like an ordinary card for your morning coffee, for a taxi, for subscriptions. But for that, you get 10% cash back in Bitcoin. And right now, they're also running a really cool campaign for March 8th. If you pay with this card, you have every chance to win a weekend in Rome. The conditions are extremely simple. Make at least 8 transactions totaling at least 600 euros and you're already in the game. Every additional 100 euros spent gives you one more chance to win. And if you manage to make your first transaction before March 20th, you'll get 8% cash back on it. How do you sign up? Register on Whitebit, complete verification, and then open a virtual card or order a physical one. And then you add it to Apple Pay or Google Pay and start making payments. Next, let's talk about taxes. Honestly, this is my favorite thing about Europe. In France, the progressive tax ranges from 11 to 45%. Of course, there are various deductions and benefits, especially for families with children, but social contributions are significant, and the social protection is among the best in the world. Not just in Europe, but in the world. I had an interesting story in France when I came there to shoot some material and met a man who was winning tenders for road repairs in France. Can you imagine a Ukrainian winning tenders for road repairs? I was really surprised by this. Everything was great, top-notch. We shot a ton of material out there in the cold, just like I always record on the street with this man. And the funny thing is, when I got home to Poland, I realized that the audio hadn't recorded, but I remember everything he said. And the story goes like this. He says that sometimes the profits are such that at some point he thinks, should I just close the business? I'm saying this because he actually has another business on the side. He says that sometimes the profits can reach more than 50%. So friends, of course, it's up to you to decide. Especially, please write if you are an IT specialist living in France and what tax rate you personally pay in your field. Share your experience. It would be very interesting to learn about it. Most importantly, today I will be sharing the experiences of Ukrainians whom I have interviewed. I have already conducted more than 30 interviews with Ukrainians in various European countries. So this information will be useful and supported by the real stories of Ukrainians living in these countries. As for a Ukrainian woman living in France, she experienced a very unusual situation. Her child was diagnosed with a disease, meningitis. It is incurable. But the point is that France fully supports her child and they are helping her with medical care. They also cover her social contributions there. And from such a negative story, what information do we take for ourselves? That France is indeed a very socially secure country. And if you're interested in learning more about this story, you can watch this video about France. If we look at rental prices outside of Paris, it can be cheaper. It may sound obvious, but some people just imagine that France is only Paris. But that's not the case. There's also the French Riviera, as well as Bordeaux, Toulouse, and in those places you can rent an apartment starting from 600 euros per month. For example, in Marseille, it will also cost from 600 to 900 euros per month. And even if you consider smaller towns and provinces, it can start from 400 euros. So the choice is up to you. If we compare food prices, you can now see the prices for the most common products. And by the way, I personally went to a supermarket in France and checked the food prices there myself. If I share my personal impressions after visiting France, I have a couple of updates. One good and one not so good. The good news is that France sometimes feels like a dream come true. It becomes real when you arrive there and just take in those views. And that's something that really draws you in. We even visited a small town called Pau, not far from Toulouse and Bordeaux, and I was really surprised by the architecture. In short, France is really amazing, and there are such unique cities there that truly impressed me. But on the downside, what I personally didn't really like is that France kind of pushes you away a bit with its dirtiness. I didn't really like the metro, and in general, the pace of life there. The pace in France is completely different, not the same as, for example, if you compare it to Poland. They're all like that, not in a hurry, just chilling, totally relaxed. So, well, it's not really okay for me, but it's up to you to decide. If we go back to the downsides of France, then maybe it's a minus or maybe a plus, the French language, which you absolutely have to learn. English just won't work for you there at all. And learning French, well, honestly, that's a whole separate quest because, in my opinion, it's a really difficult language. Well, if you compare it, though, damn, what can you even compare it to, since Polish is also difficult? Basically, they're all difficult. But the thing is, without French, you won't be able to solve any issues there. And another downside is the different nationalities in France who sometimes they live by their own rules, their own understanding in their own groups. But because of these different population groups, there are often rallies, protests, and to be honest, terrorist attacks. France is truly a great country for those who count on generous social benefits, on extensive social assistance, and generally love living in beautiful, stunningly historic cities. Next on our list is the Czech Republic. You know, to me, it's an accessible part of Europe with free education. I'll tell you more about education a bit later. Let's start with the mentality. The mentality of the locals, they are calm, reserved, and even a bit closed off. And this was also mentioned by one of the Ukrainians who has been living there for more than 8 years in this very video. And he said that no matter how much he interacts with Czechs, he even has Czech friends, but he has never once been to a Czech person's home. That is, they come to visit them and, by the way, really enjoy coming over to someone else's home, but they never invite anyone to their own place. But maybe it's not so much that they're closed off, it's just that they really value their personal space, and for them, they're more family-oriented. And also, Czechs love beer, and that's a fact. Alexander also said that it's true. They really do love beer. They can ride their bikes, park somewhere, have a beer, and then keep going. Honestly, I like that kind of pace. That's exactly why the Czech Republic isn't at the bottom of the list. So, let's figure out how much you can earn in the Czech Republic. And here I'll be repeating myself a bit because it's the same Europe, where salaries start from 1 to 2,000 euros. And honestly, I don't even know if there are any other salaries. If you look at IT, medicine, or engineering, you can actually earn from 2,000 euros and up. I'm talking net salary here. If we're talking about the provinces, it's from 1,400 euros. The minimum wage in the Czech Republic is about 800 to 900 euros. If we take the average salary across the country, it's from 1,500 euros net. But now, let's get into a real breakdown. For example, a family of 3, let's say roughly we'll take 2,500 euros here, expenses will amount to 1,800 to 2,000, so what's left is literally about 700 euros. It's a bit better than in Poland, but still, it's not that much. Taxes in the Czech Republic, by the way, are relatively moderate. The basic tax rate is 15%, 15 to 11%. Compared to Germany or France, it's a bit easier. But now, let's talk about housing and food prices. According to Alexander, housing in Prague is the most expensive in Europe. Well, you know, with all the Ukrainians I interviewed, they all think that their city has the most expensive housing in all of Europe. But let's look at the numbers and the facts. You can now see the prices for groceries. Here we're taking only the most basic products. And if you compare it with other countries, if we talk about personal impressions, the Czech Republic feels quiet and calm. What I personally like is that the climate there is milder, it's warmer than here in Poland. Right now we are in Krakow. To be honest, I'm cold, I'm just freezing here. But in the Czech Republic, there's a bit of a special atmosphere, kind of a medieval vibe. And also there's beer there and some cozy little cafes. You know, this whole beer culture, which is respected by all beer lovers and draws them there, it's everywhere you look. But of course, there are always some nuances. Their nightlife adds a certain energy and drive, but it can be a bit of a nuisance if you live, for example, in the city center. There are a lot of our people in the Czech Republic. You can feel it just by walking down the street. Now let's move on to one of the advantages of the Czech Republic, education. And it's free there, even for foreigners. And it was like that even before the war. So, if you know Czech, you can submit your documents and app and enroll. How do you say it? Correct me if I'm wrong. You love it. You adore leaving comments when you correct me. You can enroll in a university there in the Czech language. My friend graduated from a university in Prague. But you know, if I compare my life to that of immigrants who moved to the Czech Republic about 8 years ago, my life, for example, in Odessa was not worse than theirs in the Czech Republic. She had to work, study at university, and also know the Czech language. So, to be honest, I didn't need any of that. While I was living in the city of Odessa, I was fully fluent in the local language, held a position at a major company, lived in my own apartment, and was earning a decent salary. Now let's give a verdict on the Czech Republic. It's perfect for those who want a standard European life without any sky-high expenses. Cons? Of course, you need to learn Czech, and I've already told you about the downsides. Next is Spain, and this is where my absolute favorite part begins. because we were planning to move to Spain, but as you can see, it's not at the top of our list since I changed my mind about moving there. Why? I'll explain now. In Spain, you know, it's always siesta time, chill, relaxation. But for people who need to work, who strive for more, who want to earn money, the opportunities here in Poland are honestly much greater than in Spain. And so after living there for a month, we just realized that no, we actually want to be in Poland. Everything here is here it's even more developed than in Spain. Over there, they're still a bit stuck in the past. By the way, I also had a lot of videos from Spain, and oddly enough, all those videos were specifically with real estate agents or owners of real estate agencies. Because, to be honest, there's really nothing else to do there except buy or rent out property. An important point about Spain is that each region there is like a separate country. Catalonia, where Barcelona is different from Madrid. In general, all these regions are completely different from each other. Regarding salaries, the minimum wage in Spain is 1,134 euros per month, that's net. The average salary is from 2 to 2,500 euros. IT specialists in Barcelona and Madrid earn 35 to 55,000 euros per year gross. But tourism and gastronomy are very developed there, and you can earn from 1,200 to 1,600 euros. These are the kinds of options you can find there, of course, but the question is, what is the unemployment rate in Spain? And the rate there is like this compared to other European countries. But what's interesting is that this rate has dropped significantly in recent years. Of course, that's great information, but the issue is that if you compare it to other European countries, it's still high. If we take expenses in large cities such as Madrid, it's at least 2,500 to 3,500 euros per month. That includes rent, utilities, and groceries. In medium-sized cities, it will be approximately 1,800 to 2,500 euros. And in the provinces, you can live on 1,200 to 1,800 euros per month. Right now, please write a comment and tell us how much you spend per month on living expenses in your country, where you live. And if I told you that in France, everyone is so chill and relaxed, then let me say this. France is nervously smoking on the sidelines compared to Spain, because over there, everyone is truly chill and laid back. I don't know what makes them so relaxed there. Maybe it's because they have the sea nearby or, well, yes, of course, I think the sea, well, it does a pretty good job of relaxing you, the sea, the sun, but they really aren't in a hurry to go anywhere. Our friends who live in Spain, they moved from the USA to Spain. It's a very unusual story, but well, it's true. They moved to Spain. They say that when it comes to processing documents, you just have to, I don't know, wait there for months. And that's just to get an appointment. Not even to get the documents done for you. They have certain people there who put you on the waiting list and, well, basically fixers, as we call them. Nothing gets resolved quickly there. They're always taking snack breaks. I totally get them. The sea, the sun, the beach, sangria for 2 euros. Literally 2 euros. I bought it myself there. You just get hooked on this chill lifestyle and end up not rushing anywhere yourself. Let's sum it up now. Spain is paradise on one hand, but on the other hand, you know, it's paradise for those who have money, who show up there with a suitcase and just live there. That's just awesome. But if you want to earn money, if you want to save up, and honestly, you don't really have much money, then I would choose another country to move to. If we talk about food prices in Spain, they are among the most affordable in all of Europe. Food prices are low, and most importantly, they really are delicious. Honestly, I've never tasted cherry tomatoes as delicious as the ones in Spain. Shrimp, seafood. Honestly, I think at some point you'll still get tired of them, or, well, in short, they'll start to annoy you. I don't know. Write in the comments. The point is, there really are a lot of delicious foods there. And of course, how could you go without sangria? Sangria is just top-notch. Sometimes it's actually cheaper than bread. We went to Mercadona there. We went there all the time because it's one of the most popular stores in Spain. You can even buy tasty salads there, try them, and it won't cost you all the money in the world. Let's sum it up now. Spain is the best for quality of life by the sea. By the way, with pretty reasonable prices. But this country is not for making money. So next we have Austria, and here things get very, very interesting. Let's start with the mentality. Austrians are polite, punctual, a bit formal, and I would say meticulous, just like the Germans. But for them, order and traditions are almost sacred. They are open towards foreigners, especially if those foreigners are qualified and willing to follow the rules and work for a modest wage. Austria is like a softer version of Germany. People there are more relaxed. I really liked Vienna, the Viennese cafes, and honestly, out of all of Europe, Vienna is probably the only place I truly liked. But Austria is very, very expensive. I was genuinely surprised by the prices there. I was surprised that some specific goods are particularly expensive. But what really surprised me was the price of renting an apartment, because I did an interview there with a Ukrainian woman. By the way, that video hasn't been released on my channel yet. It will come out a bit later. And I was so surprised that she rents an apartment for the same price as we do here in Krakow. That is, she rents an apartment in Vienna for 1,100 euros. While here in Krakow, we pay the same amount for rent. Well, that's really something, isn't it? I mean, Krakow and Vienna, those are worlds apart, right? So what about their incomes and expenses over there? Let's break it down. Plumbers and electricians there earn about 53,000 euros a year. A nurse can earn from 35,000 to 45,000 euros per year. If you're an IT specialist, you can earn 70,000 euros a year or more there. By the way, I couldn't find an official minimum wage in Austria because it's replaced by collective agreements. And what is that? That's a peculiarity of Austria. Now, about taxes, don't expect anything good here. After all, we're talking about Europe, right? Remember? Here, there's a progressive scale from 20 to 55% for the wealthiest, and for the average income, it's about 35 to 40% of the total burden. As for health insurance, it's included in the social contributions. If we take housing prices, as I already mentioned, in Vienna, you can rent a decent apartment for 1,100 euros. I'm talking about Vienna here. If we take Salzburg, where we also were, there you can rent an apartment for 800 euros. If we take the provinces, then it's generally from 600 euros. You know, one of the most pressing problems for new immigrants is actually finding a place to live. And the issue is not just the price of housing, but specifically the paperwork. Are you a foreigner? In other words, you have to go through 3 circles of hell just to rent a place there. As a Ukrainian woman told me, they were simply lucky to rent it for that kind of budget. And overall, let's just say they were really fortunate. To sum up, Austria is a place with a high quality of life. In fact, Austria is among the top places in terms of quality of life. It's clean, safe, there are places to walk, there's some culture, and nature is close by especially. But there is also a problem there, and it's something our entrepreneurs who have started businesses there feel very strongly. The issue is that there is a significant shortage of personnel there. And just for our Ukrainian woman to find, say, a specialist, a depilation master, or a salon administrator, it took her more than half a year. So that's a real problem there. By the way, let me remind you that German is spoken in Austria, and you also need to learn it. Well, this drawback will run like a thin thread through all the countries. Now, German. I would describe it with this slogan: high salaries and absurd bureaucracy. I'll explain why in a moment. But let's start with the mentality. Germans are very meticulous, punctual, and rational. They, are not used to excessive emotions in communication, but at the same time, they are open. It seems to me more open, in my opinion, than the Czechs, for example. But, remembering this video, do you remember? Hello. Thank you very much.
Hello? Thank you very much.
From his facial expression, you might think he's happy to see you, but then it turns out that no, he's actually not happy to see you at all. To say that Europeans in general are open people, I wouldn't say that. It seems to me that the most open nation is Ukrainians, and that's true. I clearly remember when I was coming back from the USA after the work and travel program, I landed in Boryspil, got on a bus, and some lady stepped on my foot. Oh, actually, I stepped on her foot. She goes, "You're an idiot, can't you see where you're going?" And I thought, oh God, this is our people. I feel like you just won't find anything like this anywhere but in Ukraine. But going back to Germans, they'll never tell you to your face that they just don't like you. What else I want to say about Germans is that, of course, they love to report you. If you parked in the wrong place, if you didn't mow the lawn properly, then be ready. Come here. My friend, whom I visited in Germany, told me about this. We filmed a video. Here, take a look at this video. This is simply one of the top videos on my channel. And she talked about this in detail, I would say. Now, regarding income and expenses, let me tell you the numbers now, and you can figure out the rest yourself. The minimum salary in Germany is approximately 1,300 euros gross. IT specialists there can earn from 70 to 80,000 euros per year. Engineers from 55 to 75,000 euros per year. In the medical field, you can earn from 60 to 100,000 euros per year. Interestingly, my friend got into a German company almost immediately after she moved to Germany because of the war. You see, working in a German company is not just about a salary starting from 2,000 euros, provided you know English and preferably German as well. It also means great social protection and an excellent benefits package. And let's not forget that Germany is also one of the top countries in terms of social protection. So if this is your main priority, I would definitely consider Germany as an option. What about taxes in Germany? And here it gets very, very interesting. The overall burden there is about 40% of your income. This includes income tax of up to 45%, mandatory health insurance, which is about 7%, pension contributions, 9%, and unemployment insurance. Basically, I could keep calculating and calculating here, and it's a lot, and everyone understands that. But you really do get strong social protection, as Europeans say. Well, it's up to you to decide. Let's quickly go over housing prices. Renting in Germany is one of the biggest challenges because it's not just about finding an apartment or a place to live, but also about passing this casting process so that the landlord actually likes you. It's quite a quest. In Berlin and Munich, a studio costs from 1,500 to 2,000 euros per month. Frankfurt, Hamburg, from 1,200 to 1,800 euros. Smaller cities like Leipzig, Dresden, Nuremberg, from 700 to 1,000 euros. But apartment hunting, as I already mentioned, is a separate, hellish, I would even say, quest. Have you ever heard of 50 people showing up to view an apartment? And you can just imagine how crazy the competition is there, right? And they also require a huge package of documents just so you can rent an apartment with your own money. That really surprises me. As for food prices, you can see them on the screen right now, and you can compare for yourself. The prices are cheaper than in Austria, for example. Because my friend, by the way, lives on the border between Germany and Austria, and she says that she only shops in Germany because as soon as you cross that border, the price tags for groceries are about 1.5 times higher. What else can I briefly summarize about Germany? It's the bureaucracy. You need a whole pile of documents there just to get a job or to rent a place to live. You need paperwork everywhere. It's strange they haven't come up with a document just to go to the store yet. If you also needed paperwork to go shopping, then I would really be shocked. But, they do have a stable economy and excellent infrastructure. By the way, there's free education for children, very well-developed public transport, and there's this feeling of security there, which can sometimes be very hard to find. Verdict on Germany, the best country for career growth, and my friend is proof of that. And stability, but you have to be prepared for a lot of paperwork and a tough first year, or actually, I would even say the first 3 years. And rounding out our list is Poland. I would describe it like this. The system works like clockwork. Let's start with the mentality. It's a country with a high level of discipline. That's how I would put it. There is order here and a structured approach to everything. What surprises me is that after the collapse of the Soviet Union in Poland in the 90s, there was absolutely nothing here. I mean, there was just devastation, let's put it that way. And now we can see how much it has developed in such a short period of time. And that really is impressive. What about the mentality? They are cultured like all Europeans. That's true. I would say that, of course, there is sometimes a bit of hostility towards Ukrainians. But to be honest, have I ever really encountered it myself? No, I haven't. And if it did happen, it was from people who were, not quite right in the head. Well, let's be honest. I mean, a reasonable person would never come up to you and say, go back to Ukraine. That never happened to me. It was only really unreasonable people, like when you look someone in the eyes and realize there's just nothing there at all. So I don't even get offended by that. By the way, a quick word about mentality. What surprised me? When I was just starting my YouTube channel, Poles would write me tons of messages like, go back to Ukraine, get out of Poland. And now I get tons of comments in Polish like, Natalia, we're so grateful that you, as an immigrant like you are, moved here to Poland. And we love you. I just get so many words of gratitude. I'm glad that at some point I managed to go through this with dignity and didn't pay attention to those negative comments. And to those who write positive comments, here's a like and a follow for you. By the way, I've even been invited to Polish radio here. I was there, gave an interview. Well, that's cool, isn't it? A Ukrainian woman, was invited to Polish radio. Where else does that happen? So I'm not going to complain about the mentality or about Poland in general. And as you noticed, it's first on my list. The first country is Poland. Just 4 years ago, I wouldn't have believed it. Let's quickly talk about expenses and salaries. The average salary in Poland is between 1,200 and 1,500 euros gross. For a comfortable life, ideally, you'd want 1,500 to 1,800 euros. How much do IT specialists earn here? They earn from 2,000 euros and up. If you go into medicine, construction, or logistics, it's from 1,200 to 1,800 euros. So for working people, it's 2,600 euros gross, 2,100 euros net. But what are the actual monthly expenses for a family? Rent here, of course, depends on the city, but it's between 700 and 1,300 euros. For groceries, I would budget 300 to 500 euros, and for transport, communication, utilities, all that, another 200 to 300 euros. So in total, expenses amount to 1,800 euros, and you're left with only 300 euros. Well, it's not much, but as they say, that's the reality. That's the reality. And you know my opinion about Europe, right? That it feels like you're just working to survive, not working to actually live. Well, it's true. I'll share my feelings about Poland. Maybe I've just gotten used to it, or maybe there really are some advantages here. Because after we spent a month living in Spain, I realized that Poland has a lot of advantages. The first advantage, there are more of us Ukrainians here than anywhere else. That's already a great start and a great foundation if you're starting your own business. Well, the community really makes a difference. Warsaw is actually a hub where there are a lot of Ukrainians and a lot of opportunities. There's always some event going on, some kind of activity. We live in Krakow, and it's generally considered a cozy and touristy city. It's calm, nice, and there are lots of Ukrainians, lots of opportunities. By the way, in Krakow, we're going to have a big event for entrepreneurs and people who want to grow, who want more and strive for more. Influencers. Everyone is invited to the event in Krakow on April 26th. We'll meet there at Jubilat in the city center, and we'll tell you what you need to build a business and find clients in Europe. And so I am finishing my comparison of the countries. What do I want to say? I want to say that I want to go home. I want to go home to Ukraine, but the reality is a bit different right now. And if I were to take a look back at the whole list of places I mentioned today, out of those 6 different countries at this very moment, my absolute favorite country is still Poland. Simply because I have truly gotten used to living there over time. Everything is clear here, everything is understandable. If you want to go open a bank account, okay, you can go and open it. In other words, there are no problems, you know. If you want to rent an apartment, you go and rent one. And among my favorite countries, there's also Spain. Spain is just for relaxation. Friends, but which country you choose depends on your own priorities. Let me remind you, this was my subjective opinion. I would choose based on this for career and earnings, Poland, Germany, and Austria. For education and getting started, that's the Czech Republic and also Poland. For quality of lifestyle, that's France and Spain. And for a budget option, that's also Poland and the Czech Republic. If we're talking about quality and stability, that's Austria and Germany. For digital nomads, that's Spain. By the way, I didn't mention digital nomads. These are people who work remotely. For families with children, that's the Czech Republic, Austria, and Germany. But dear community, dear family, you have to understand that starting from scratch will be difficult everywhere. You need to be prepared to work, to adapt, and to learn the language. And what's important is not only your financial preparation, but also your mental readiness. You must understand that you are going into emigration and no one here will ever open the door for you or be glad, just because. So try to live at least 1 to 3 months in the country before making, this final decision. I would also give this recommendation. Don't constantly compare things to how they were at home, because at least for me, it was always better at home. Dear family, write in the comments now which country from the ranking surprised you the most. Be sure to leave a comment. Give this video a like and write a comment. And this was Natalie with you. And we will definitely see each other again in the very next exciting episodes of this ongoing series, so stay tuned.